And joining us now is JD Hayworth, host of Newsmax Prime. Good to have you.
It is good to be here, and there is some good news from my vantage point to talk about this afternoon.
That's why I wanted to have you out here, JD. Just before we came out here on the set this afternoon, a report coming from the Associated Press in terms of this executive orders on immigration reform. Here's what the AP said. Federal agents, or Federal Appeals Court rather, has refused to lift that temporary hold on President Obama's executive actions that could shield these millions of illegals from deportation. This is the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. This comes after Texas asked for a hold on this measure.
And this is a big win as we see file footage ostensibly of the Rio Grande portion of our southern border where illegals come back and forth with impunity. The scene shifted from Texas to the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit in New Orleans. A 2-1 decision today. The two-judge majority saying the president had overstepped his bounds. Now it's important to realize what was at stake here. This is what has been nicknamed Amnesty Light, the Deferred Action Plan for Parental Accountability. And this was the situation where people were saying, gee, I was brought here as a youngster when I wasn't of a legally accountable age. You got to let me stay. Of course, the White House and other open borders advocates looking for a way to poeticize as well as politicize this called them dreamers. But basically, the judges said this would be a nightmare to try and implement in Texas. Quoting from the majority decision, DAPA, the DREAM Act, modifies substantive rights and interests, conferring lawful presence on 500,000 illegal aliens in Texas, forcing the state to choose between spending millions of dollars to subsidize driver's licenses and changing its law. And so what this does,
what does this ruling mean, though? What is
it means, and this is the problem area, Miranda. It means if the administration actually listens to the court, they are to stand down. The disturbing reports are that this administration, forget about listening to the Congress, they're not listening to the courts. After the initial ruling was issued by Judge Andrew Hanen down on the border in, I believe, in El Paso, that federal judge issued the initial injunction. And as we understand it, the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security has ignored it and moved full speed ahead with the Dreamers Act. Now the Fifth Circuit has said, we agree with Judge Hanen, stop. But this president has shown an unwillingness to do so. So it sets up, were this, if I would care to venture a couple of comments about the way things are covered, if this president were a Republican, all hell would break loose from the national media. This would be called a constitutional crisis. But because the Washington press corps always and forever cheers for Mr. Obama, this will be sublimated and suborned down the agenda. But it is huge news, and it's something that this White House should take very seriously.
And what the White House has used constantly is what they say, we don't have the resources within the Department of Homeland Security to execute the law, right? Do you think they can still hide behind that as an excuse now that there is a judge in the appellate court saying that that's not really the case? That's not going to work.
Well, you had Judge Hanen, and now you have the two judges on the Fifth Circuit saying, hey, listen, this is a clear end run of the Constitution. You need to stop it right now. This is what it boils down to. And the other thing that's been interesting, John, bureaucrats may have said they didn't have the resources. The president rhetorically has said on a number of issues, we don't have time to wait. This is so urgent. Oh, really? It's so urgent you're going to leave aside the Constitution? And what we see here is the third branch of government, the judiciary, stepping up. Now, will the president turn a deaf ear to the judiciary as he has to the Congress? Or does he think by going to the Supreme Court he can lean on somebody there to get a 5-4 decision in his own favor? That remains to be seen. It is worth noting tonight, when Dick Morris joins us, one aspect of this may be rendered moot by the so-called trade agreement. And Dick will be here to explain just how TPP essentially is another effort to end run the Constitution and put yet more power into the executive branch.
And that's coming up tonight at 8 o'clock Central Time. What else do you got
Actually,
cooking?
8 o'clock Eastern, 7
Eastern,
Central, and
sorry.
5 o'clock Pacific. And for the
Got my
folks in the
time
Mountain
zone
Time
changed
Zone, that'll be
around.
4
Thanks
o'clock.
for clearing that up for
Gotta
us.
get that-
There does
get
seem
that
to be
all
a
done.
little bit more confidence from the leadership in Congress and ability to get this deal done. So we'll be interesting to get Dick's take on that, JD.
Yep, and I messed up on the Mountain Time Zone.
Don't worry
It's
about that.
8
I think
o'clock
I messed
Eastern,
you up.
8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central, 6 o'clock Mountain, 5 o'clock Pacific. That covers all the whys and
think you covered
wherefores with the
everything.
numbers. So 8 o'clock Eastern, we'll have Dick Morris here. Also, we'll talk with Colonel Derek Harvey about what has transpired, the comments of Ashton Carter, the defense secretary, and now an Iraqi offensive to retake Ramadi. All that and more tonight on Newsmax Prime.
Sounds good, JD.
See you then, JD.